What's up, everyone? It's Dakota, and welcome back to another Magic the Gathering video. And I'm here in not potato headset audio quality or whatever the heck, and bringing you the March 31st, 2025 ban restricted announcement for Magic the Gathering. And I'm super excited because this is going to be almost a guaranteed big change for the modern format. You know, of course, we have our own predictions, and we're going to be going over what we predict before we actually go into the article, and of course, read the explanation for why each of the formats that we really care about were affected this way on this day. So hopefully kind of expecting something huge. I've been trying to avoid spoilers essentially and try to, not spoil it, so I have like a genuine reaction to what is going on. So hopefully y'all enjoy the video. Of course, if you do, please leave a like on the video, and of course subscribe to the channel if you've not already done so. We're trying to get to 2K subscribers by the end of the year. Of course, go ahead and follow me over on Twitch as well. We've been streaming quite a bit. We're going to be playing a lot more modern with the modern RCQ coming up, and of course we're going to be focusing on a little bit of standard as well, since that will be the regional championship season coming up here very shortly, especially the two that we're going to have here in the United States, being in Hartford and Minneapolis. This is going to be fun to watch, and we're going to be figuring out what kind of standard format we're going to be looking at as well with this banned and restricted announcement. So definitely go ahead and check all that stuff out, and real quickly we'll recap kind of what we expected for each of these formats before we actually get into the list. So first, we're going to start with standard. I thought standard was going to be in an all or nothing space here. I think that if you ended up banning something like Monstrous Rage, Up the Beanstalk, and This Town Ain't Big Enough, which were kind of the cards that I thought were on kind of this watch list of, maybe these might be too good for an expanded format. Standard is as big as it's ever been. I mean, I think even if you go all the way back to when extended was a thing, I don't even think it was as big as the standard format that we have now. And so I think that there has to be a little bit of a difference in philosophy. Like, I think when you had standard being like a year and a half's worth of sets to 2 years, I think that banning things when they were like mega problematic was kind of good. And I think now you have to kind of have like maybe an artificial rotation in some way for like 1 or 2 cards of the format. This time I think you could have made the argument for 3, and I think you had to do 3 if you were going to do any of them. So for us, I think it was more all or nothing, and I think I was kind of in favor of all over nothing personally for me, but I also think standard aside from that is in a pretty decent space. The modern format, we were basically banking on the fact that Underworld Breach is going to get banned. There was really nothing else that I think absolutely needs to get banned. It's just going to be depending on what we think will be really good in the metagame, as the best superlative I can come up with for the modern format after the fact. I mean, we can look at something like Boros Energy, which we don't think is going to get anything banned, but I think that there could be some cards on the watch list there as we kind of move past this list. Of course, the Eldrazi decks, the Eldrazi ramp decks, have a lot of great tools, especially in Ugin's Labyrinth and Sowing Microspawn and Kozilek's Command, that these are just cards that are very powerful in the deck. They do kind of mesh very well and line up very well with what is going on in the format. I mean, a 4-mode command that has like 4 modes that are like never really dead, really sweet, and unconditional soul. I mean, a mostly unconditional soul land. Like, technically, you do have to put a card that costs colorless card 7 or greater cost underneath of it. But of course, if you're playing those decks, you just have those cards. You have those just lying around. Like, you just pick one up and put it underneath of there. And of course, Sowing Microspawn, proving to be one of the best Eldrazi creatures, I think, from the new Modern Horizons set, especially if you consider all formats into account, especially Legacy, where, Brian Koval, Bosch and Roll, has been talking pretty extensively about just getting Microspawn out of the format. But, that's kind of our take on modern potential unbannings. We wanted to see like Deathrite Shaman, Dig Through Time, Ponder, the Artifact Lands, and Glimpse of Nature as cards. And, we had a pretty big banning last time, and they still ended up unbanning cards. So we'll kind of see if the trend kind of follows there, or if we're just going to kind of hold off on it. Maybe it's a very once in a while kind of thing. In Pioneer, I think that Fable the Mirror Breaker needs to see a ban. I think is a card that is kind of a long time coming. I think it's like one of the best red cards that we've seen in quite a long time, maybe outside of Monstrous Rage, honestly. And, it's just a very powerful card. It does so much for 3 mana. And while it is a fun card, I will say I experience mass amounts of like endorphins, dopamine, whatever, like every good chemical in my brain every time I cast a Fable of the Mirror Breaker and just made a goblin token. I'm like, this is awesome. And then just with every chapter on that saga that just ticked up, I was just like full of just like, you can't bring my mood down, and then my opponent kills me on turn 4. So that's going to be that's our thoughts and predictions for this ban and restricted announcement. If you want more in-depth kind of on my reasoning behind these things, you can go ahead and check out my video that I posted last Monday Monday on the subject and kind of why I thought each card was okay and why you needed to consider these certain cards, a more in-depth reason, of course. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the article and see what exactly is changing in the Modern, Standard, and Pioneer format on March 31st, 2025. So here we have our banned and restricted announcement, March 31st, 2025, and unfortunately we can see that we're pretty disappointed at the start here. So Standard, there's no changes. Pioneer, no changes. Modern, Underworld Breach is unbanned. The trifecta is complete for Underworld Breach. Kind of one of the most, not one of the most anticlimactic, because there's definitely been some pretty anticlimactic ban lists. But, this is kind of what we expected for the Modern format. Underworld Breach, getting the axe. We're finally done with it. It only took one card, Mox Opal, to make it absolutely busted and make it probably the best card in the format. No more value breaches for anybody. No more breaches for nobody. This card is finally gone. Legacy, we see Sowing Michael Spawn and Troll of Khazad Doom. I hope that's right, and if you're Lord of the Rings buff, I would apologize, but I'm not apologizing to anybody over it. So these cards getting banned in Legacy, no vintage changes. Pauper, 3 cards getting banned, Basking Brute Scale, Kodotha Rebirth, Deadly Dispute, Prophetic Prism, High Tide being unbanned, and seemingly no other changes to any other format. So the ones that we really care about the most, Underworld Breach here. We'll read kind of the understanding between Standard, Pioneer, and Modern. So let's go ahead, scroll down here. I also have the article linked in the description down below as well if you want to read on your own here. There's a little preamble, and of course on their twitch.tv/magic tomorrow on April 1st at 10 a.m. Pacific time, which I believe is like 1 p.m. Eastern time. You are able to kind of, check out the stream, and they'll go in depth about what is going on here. So going on, Standard, there's no changes. Written by JD and Kleparents, a very, very good Magic player on the Star City Games tour. I definitely remember watching them play a lot of Jund, just, I don't know, Jund's kind of like, back in the day. It's just value piles. It's so sweet. So in the article, it reads, the Standard is flourishing and there's no changes to the format in this announcement. Our approach to Standard banned and restricted updates remains unchanged. We are committed to leaving the format as untouched as possible from one rotation to the next, banning cards only if something truly problematic to the health of the format emerges. Once a year, right before rotation, we'll consider more nuanced changes with the goal of making the format as fun and dynamic as possible for the duration of the next rotation cycle. We aren't to that once a year moment yet, and both Tarkir Dragonstorm and Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy will have a chance to make their mark on Standard before the format rotates with Edge of Eternity. So looks like instead of, again, this kind of philosophy we've kind of pushed on the channel where, if with the Standard this big, where I believe we have, 3 years worth of sets, and then we also have, Foundations, which is going to be 5 years, and it's going to span up until, I believe, 2029, that I would think that bannings would be a little bit more welcomed. Obviously bannings in general are a good thing. Obviously you just wish that every kind of card that came out, it was balanced and powerful, and you had a, super diverse metagames where players could literally play a ham sandwich and potentially top 8 with it. But, aside from that, I guess depending on the player you are, you technically could, but, with this, it seems like we're going to see just more nuanced changes. We're going to try to leave the format as untouched as possible and wait until something just completely dominates the format. Now, what's their definition of dominate? Who knows? Apparently, I think like a 56 or 57% win rate at the Pro Tour doesn't mean anything. And of course, like abysmal combat kind of strategy as well is not very good either. But, apparently like this is fine. And, for the most part, maybe it's okay. So we go on to read here. Standard was a display at the Pro Tour Aether Drift to showcase a rich, diverse metagame. The big three have been clearly identified, with Grow Mice, Esper Pixie, and Domain Overlords being the most popular strategies. Despite the definition of the top of the metagame, those 3 decks represented only half the field, and the other half was wide open. And this seems kind of funny, I think. And I think if this was like Modern, where we had seen like 4 or 5 decks that are like half of the metagame, and the other half of the metagame's kind of whatever, depending on how you view it. With Standard having like 3 decks be half of the metagame, the other half of the field being kind of wide open, I think is actually probably pretty good for Standard, all things considered, because usually the really good strategies were usually in like a 2 to 3 deck format anyway with Standard, and the rest are just kind of like you end up beating 1 or 2 of the decks, but you don't end up beating the third. So I think that's kind of okay. I think I'm generally okay with this announcement just for the fact, again, that I think it had to be all or nothing. So the fact that we didn't have all means we have nothing. So everybody kind of gets to have their thing. One of the most exciting aspects of the standard format is the degree in which it continues to evolve even between set releases. The self-balanced synergy decks featuring Nurturing Pixie and Or This Town Big Enough are a well-known pillar of standard now, but weren't popular over a month after the release of Magic the Gathering Foundations. Despite the fact that the shell of this deck existed in the format ever since the release of Duskborn House of Horror. With Tarkir Dragonstorm and Magic the Gathering Final Fantasy on the horizon, it's going to be fascinating to watch the journey of the standard format. I'm very excited to see what players do with the cards and the new deck strategies that emerge. Also, Modern Horizons 4 confirmed the fact that they use Horizons in standard. Anyway, Pioneer, written by Arya, another very, very, very good Magic player. We have continued to keep a close eye on Pioneer since our last ban restricted announcement and have been happy with both deck diversity and representation in different macro archetypes in the format. There's been a healthy amount of churn in the Pioneer metagame over the last several months, with cards from last year continuing to make a splash across several archetypes, like the mouse package that we see here as a part of the aggressive strategies, mirroring standard mice packages. Fear missing out on Holy Annex, seeing play in the Rakdos mid-range shells, and changing the way decks have been playing, giving a lot more closing power. Yigra and Scavenger's Talent being creating more combo-centric version of Judge Sacrifice, leaving players with a strong creature combo deck after the Amalia banning. Overlord Cycle of Duskborn has reshaped the Ignimag Incarnation as an archetype, which is something that we saw even at the Washington Regional Championship. Cards like Artist Talent, Izzet Phoenix, Valor's Flagship, and Greasefang. What does this card even do? So first strike lifelink whenever you cycle this card. I'm surprised. I guess you get to make pilots and stuff. Whatever. It's like probably fine. Providing a little bit more consistency and strength to an existing deck. Despite the churn, the Pioneer metagame has remained well balanced with a largely variety of play styles, variable with no deck archetype having problematic win rate or play rate. The metagame continues to evolve with new decks like Dimir Bounce making their way to the format. The continuing amount of the metagame is developed, but at this time we're happy with the state of Pioneer and no changes to the format. All right, Modern by Carmen. Great. A great commentator on the Star City Games tour, or rather like the Star City Games like regional, stuff like the broadcast, just someone that I didn't initially love like their very first time like doing commentary with like Matthias all the way back for, Star City Games when they were doing like tour, the SCG Tour, the SCG Opens and things like that. But definitely someone that's grown on me is probably one of my favorite commentators, honestly, of the crew that they end up getting. So I'm glad to see that they are, doing these events and things like that. I absolutely love it. To echo a point from the opening of the article, December's update to the Modern ban list did a lot to breathe new light in the format. We've seen Mox Opal, Green Sun Zenith, Faithless Looting show up on a bunch of decks in a variety of different degrees, and, Splinter Twin was there. Just showed up. It came in uninvited, just followed them here, overheard someone talking about it at the party, and just decided to show up. Green Sun Zenith showing up in Yawgmoth and Amulet Titan combo decks is something that's anticipated and we're happy with. Faithless Looting breathing new life into proactive graveyard-centric decks like Hollow One is also great. However, Mox Opal teaming up with Underworld Breach to create an explosive and resilient combo deck is not something we're happy with. And then here's Jessie Robkins' list from her victory at the Star City Games Regional Championship in Charlotte. To give a bit more context, the last couple of months have been an experimentation with different ways to play with tools in the format, but over time it has become increasingly apparent that the strongest thing to do in Modern is to play Temur Grinding Breach combo deck. The deck uses a combination of Underworld Breach, Grinding Station in conjunction with Temur Artifacts, Thassa's Oracle, Grape Shot, sometimes Jace to win the game. It seems like players have been gravitating more towards like Grape Shot plus Jace to win over Thassa's Oracle. So the deck is notoriously resistant to graveyard hate and artifact hate by virtue of its ability to diversify its threats, which made it uniquely difficult to overcome in sideboarding. Between the resiliency and its explosiveness, with it being able to win as early as the first turn, we are confident it's time to send Breach back to the Underworld. Great pun there, or a great joke, rather. With the amount of pressure that Underworld Breach put on the format, we expect the format to change a good bit with its departure, especially sideboards. Previously, we saw players committing to well over half of their sideboard to try to suppress the combo, but now we're optimistic the format can open up a bit and allow for a wider range of strategies to exist. Looking past Temur Grinding Breach, Modern looks pretty good, which I would say is kind of okay. I think that the Orzhov deck has been something that's really powerful because of, the way that it's able to interact with the Underworld Breach deck. So I think that, I almost expect the Orzhov mid-range decks or, the Esper mid-range decks or whatever to kind of, not necessarily take over the format, but still be pretty good. Just kind of diversify how they're kind of handling things. Like if there's a good graveyard deck in the format, like Orzhov is going to be an absolute house. A bunch of different decks are showing off. Orzhov Blink making a name for itself over the last last few weeks. Aether Drift has made a major impact in the format, with Ketramos and New Dawn being absolutely insane, and the aforementioned Blink decks, Marauding Mako showing up in the Hollow One decks, and Stock Up showing in the blue decks that look to play a longer game, which, trust me, just like Saga, like, there's just something about 3-mana cards, like, when they do their thing, just creating an immense amount of joy. And Stock Up is another one of those cards where, like, I play it and I just get to put 2 cards in my, I don't know, it just feels so good. All right, so we're planning on keeping an eye on the decks that were strong enough to hang despite Temur Grinding Breach's prevalence, Boros Energy decks, Dimir Oculus decks, as well as Eldrazi Variant. I like Dimir Oculus decks. Funny. I think the best weekend I've ever seen Dimir decks have was this past weekend at the Apex Gaming Invitational Qualifier, where there was like 3 of them in the top 8, and none of them made the finals, which was like actually kind of crazy, and just getting dominated by, you know, the Orzhov mid-range deck, as well as Eldrazi variants, Aim of the Titan, and then the Orzhov Blink deck. We're watching red-white energy variants, the closest to see if a reasonable counterplay emerges for the coming regional championship qualifier season. We're excited to see what players cook up. So, again, kind of repeating the same sentiment that we had in our video, where I think red-white, you know, was one of the best strategies after Nadu banning, and then once we kind of got into this where, you know, the One Ring and Amped Raptor was banned, energy was still really good, and up until, you know, maybe Charlotte, or maybe even the regional championship after Portland, we saw kind of Boros Energy's metagame share take a nosedive, but it was still doing fairly well, getting players in the top 16, even 2 different players making a pretty deep run in top 8 with Boros Energy, you know, where we saw, you know, Eldrazi put 2 in the top 8 of like the first US regional championship, but then put none in the second. I mean, I think that the metagame, I kind of agree with this, where the metagame does feel like it's pretty diverse past the Temur Grinding Breach decks, and when you open up the sideboards a little bit, open up the main board even a little bit, because with players, you know, you kind of got paid off for playing things like Soul Guide Lantern or Tormod's Crypt, like in the main deck with certain strategies, not all of them, but certain ones, you know, the Yawgmoth decks in particular. I know the list that I had been playing on stream was playing, you know, three Besagus in the main deck, as well as, you know, just like 2 endurances, which it wants to play 2 endurances anyway, but, you know, that's just kind of like, you know, the nature of it is like, well, these cards are now just kind of stuck in your deck rather than, you know, the potential flexibility for it, you know. But, you know, I think I agree totally with the kind of the bannings that took place. You know, while of course we wanted, or at least I wanted, more changes to like standard, maybe some unbannings and modern, you know, overall, I think that this was a pretty safe ban and unban announcement. You know, I'm not willing to say that it was a mistake to not ban 1, 2, or 3 of the cards in standard. I don't think it's a mistake to necessarily ban any more cards in modern, or even to unban cards in modern. I think Pioneer, you know, I guess I'll take their word for it. You know, I haven't played too much of the format, just kind of like what I see in passing, and it just never really looks all that great. Like, I just remember seeing a bunch of just Rakdos decks absolutely dominate the format. But, you know, I think that we're kind of set up and we're okay for the next announcement, which seems like it'll be on June 30th, 2025. And of course, the ban restricted announcement takes place immediately today. You can now play Modern on Moto and not have to worry about getting breached unless someone didn't finish their league and just wants people to like not be prepared for it, which I guess would be kind of a sick play, but you know, it is what it is. But, you know, hope y'all enjoyed the video. If you did, again, leave a like on the video, and of course comment down below your thoughts and feelings on the banned and restricted announcement. You know, if there's cards that you want unbanned and modern, you know, also let me know in the comments down below. People have been doing that on my other videos as well. And check out the Twitch channel, you know, all the links in the description. You'll find the article, you'll find a link to my Twitch channel, Discord, my code for Manatraders, where you can sign up and get 5% off your monthly subscription and play the sweet new modern format, you know, in various different leagues, challenges, and the sort. So I really do appreciate you all for watching. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I hope to see you all in the next one.